The crystal tumbler hits the marble floor with a sharp crack. Expensive whiskey pools across the polished surface, amber liquid spreading like spilled gold beneath the dim chandeliers of the Golden Dragon's private VIP section. "Clean it up," Sir Young says, his voice cutting through the low jazz and cigar smoke. He doesn't look at Gina. He never does. To him, she's wallpaper. Furniture. The help. Gina moves without hesitation, her black uniform stark against the opulence surrounding her. She kneels beside the mess, towel in hand, absorbing the whiskey while Sir Young's associates laugh. One of them, a developer with blood diamonds in his cufflinks, makes a comment about good service. Another suggests she deserves a tip. But while Gina's hands scrub, her eyes memorize. The Rolex on the wrist of the banker to Sir Young's left, stolen goods, linked to a heist in Monaco. The tattoo barely visible on the neck of the man in the corner, Triad-affiliated, Hong Kong branch. The briefcase at Sir Young's feet, $840,000 in unmarked bills. If her intel is correct, she doesn't flinch. She doesn't speak. She simply works. "You know what, Gina?" Sir Young reaches into his jacket and pulls out a cream-colored envelope with gold embossing. He drops it into the puddle of whiskey at her feet. "I'm feeling generous tonight. That's an invitation to the Billionaire's ball this Saturday. Figured you might want to see how the other half lives." His associates erupt in laughter. "Try not to smell like grease," he adds with a smirk, turning back to his circle as if she's already disappeared. Gina picks up the soaked invitation. The lettering bleeds slightly, but she can still read it. The annual Billionaire's ball, black tie, Golden Lotus Estate. She nods once. "Thank you, Mr. Young." And she walks away, heels clicking softly against marble, the laughter fading behind her. What Sir Young doesn't know, what none of them know, is that Gina Ebony isn't really a waitress. She's a $4.2 billion heiress. Oxford-educated. Former financial analyst for the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force. And currently, she's 6 months deep into the most dangerous undercover operation of her career. Dismantling Sir Young's legitimate shipping empire, which is actually a front for one of the largest money-laundering operations on the eastern seaboard. The Golden Dragon isn't just a lounge. It's a hub. Every transaction, every handshake, every envelope passed beneath tables. Gina sees it all. She's mapped the network, identified the players, and traced over $340 million in illicit funds moving through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Monaco. But she needs proof. Hard evidence. The kind that holds up in federal court. And this invitation? This joke. This cruel, thoughtless gesture meant to humiliate her. It's exactly the opening she's been waiting for. Because the Billionaire's ball isn't just a party. It's where Sir Young closes his biggest deals. Where mayors shake hands with crime lords. Where fortunes are laundered in plain sight, disguised as charitable donations and real estate investments. Gina has 48 hours to prepare. 48 hours to transform from invisible waitress to unforgettable force of nature. 48 hours to walk into that ballroom and shift the entire balance of power in this city. Sir Young thinks he's invited her as a punchline. He's about to discover he's invited his reckoning. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. The crystal tumbler shattered against the marble with theatrical precision. Sir Young didn't flinch as shards scattered across the floor of the Golden Dragon's VIP section. Amber whiskey spreading in a slow, deliberate pool beneath his handmade Italian shoes. "Clean it up." Gina set down her tray and retrieved the cleaning supplies from the service cart. She'd done this dance before, the humiliation choreographed to perfection, performed for an audience of men in suits worth more than most people's homes. She knelt beside the mess, her black uniform stark against the opulent gold and crimson decor, and began to work. Sir Young's associates watched with the detached amusement of apex predators observing lesser creatures. The man to his right, Vincent Corso, real estate developer, 3 offshore accounts in the Bahamas, lit a cigar. To his left, Senator Hugh Brennan adjusted his Patek Philippe watch, the one purchased with campaign funds that had mysteriously disappeared from public record. Good help is hard to find, Corso said, exhaling smoke. But I suppose some people are born for this kind of work. Laughter rippled through the circle. Gina's hands moved mechanically, soaking up whiskey, collecting glass. But her mind was cataloguing everything. Corso's briefcase, slightly heavier on the left side, suggesting documents rather than cash. Brennan's nervous tell, the way he touched his wedding ring when lying. The Chinese businessman in the corner, Tommy Wu, whose shipping containers had been flagged by customs 17 times in the past year without a single inspection. The fourth man in the circle was newer to Sir Young's inner circle, Julian Cross, a hedge fund manager with ties to 3 different cartels and a yacht that had been used to move contraband across the Atlantic. He was younger than the others, more reckless, and he was staring at Gina with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Does she speak?" Cross asked. "Only when spoken to," Sir Young replied. "That's how I like them." More laughter. Gina kept her eyes down, her movements efficient and unremarkable. She'd perfected the art of invisibility over 6 months, the way to hold her body to suggest submission, the way to move through a room without drawing attention, the way to make powerful men forget she had ears and a mind. She collected the last of the glass and stood, the towel heavy with whiskey in her hands. "Wait," Sir Young said. She froze. He reached into his jacket and produced a cream-colored envelope with gold embossing. He held it for a moment, turning it between his fingers like a playing card, examining it as if considering whether she was worth the gesture. "I'm feeling generous tonight," he said finally, his voice carrying that particular brand of cruelty disguised as kindness. He dropped the invitation directly into her hands, still damp with whiskey. "That's an invitation to the Billionaire's ball this Saturday. Figured you might want to see how the other half lives." The room erupted in genuine laughter this time. Brennan nearly choked on his scotch. Cross was grinning like he'd just watched someone slip on ice. "Try not to smell like grease," Sir Young added, turning away before she could respond, already dismissing her from his attention. Gina looked down at the invitation, the gold lettering bleeding slightly into the expensive paper. The annual Billionaire's Ball. Black tie. Golden Lotus Estate. She folded it carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket. "Thank you, Mr. Young," she said, her voice steady and colorless, exactly what they expected from someone in her position. She finished cleaning, disposed of the glass, and returned to the service area. None of them watched her leave. They'd already forgotten she existed, already moved on to discussing shipping routes and investment opportunities, and which politicians needed to be bought next. Perfect. 40 minutes later, Gina stood in the employee locker room, alone except for the hum of the ventilation system. She pulled the invitation from her apron and spread it on the metal bench. The paper had dried, leaving water stains that somehow made the gold embossing shine brighter. She photographed it with her personal phone, not the burner she used for work, and sent it to a secure number with no message attached. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "Perfect. Proceed as planned." Gina deleted the message and the photo, then slipped out the back entrance of the Golden Dragon. The alley smelled like garbage and rain, a sharp contrast to the perfume and expensive liquor inside. She walked 3 blocks before catching a cab, giving the driver an address in Chinatown that wasn't her destination but close enough. She got out 2 blocks away and walked the rest, checking for tails out of habit and training. The safe house was a 4th-floor walk-up sandwiched between a dim sum restaurant and a shop that sold knock-off designer bags. She climbed the stairs, her footsteps silent on the worn carpet, and knocked twice, paused, then once more. The door opened to reveal Agent Byron Reed, FBI Organized Crime Division, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Behind him, the apartment was a controlled chaos of computer monitors, case files, and surveillance photographs that covered every inch of the walls like expensive, damning wallpaper. "Got something," Gina said, stepping inside. The team was small by design, 3 people who knew her real identity, each of them handpicked for absolute discretion. Reed was the handler, 15 years with the Bureau and a reputation for bringing down impossible targets. His face was lined with the kind of exhaustion that came from seeing too much and sleeping too little, but his eyes were sharp as ever. Across the room, Tech specialist Jordan Kim looked up from his laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting off his glasses. He was younger than Reed by a decade, a prodigy who could crack financial systems the way other people solved crossword puzzles. The invitation came through? Reed asked, closing the door behind her. Gina pulled it from her bag and laid it on the table. He threw it at me in front of his entire crew. Made a whole show of it. Told me not to smell like grease. Jordan photographed it immediately, running it through some kind of authentication software on his tablet. Original printing, not a forgery. Security details embedded in the paper fibers. Magnetic strip along the bottom edge for scanning. This is legitimate. Of course it is, Gina said, settling into a chair that had seen better days. Sir Young doesn't do anything by half measures, even his jokes. Reed studied her with the intensity of someone who'd spent years reading micro-expressions, looking for cracks in the facade. You good. I'm perfect. And she was. Gina Ebony had been undercover for 6 months, playing the role of a forgettable waitress with a convincing backstory. Single mother, night school, crushing debt. The legend was airtight because most of it was based on real people she'd known, real struggles she'd witnessed. The only lie was her identity. In reality, she was the daughter of Nathaniel Ebony, founder of Ebony Global Investments, a private equity firm worth $4.2 billion. She'd graduated from Oxford with degrees in economics and international law, spent 3 years with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, then went private sector. When the Bureau needed someone to infiltrate Sir Young's operation, someone who could move through elite circles without raising suspicion once the moment came, someone who understood how real money moved and how power actually worked, they'd come to her with a contract offer she couldn't refuse. What's the timeline? She asked, accepting the bottle of water Jordan handed her. Jordan pulled up a digital calendar on the main screen. Ball is Saturday, 8 p.m. Guest list is confirmed at 247 people. Security will be tight. Facial recognition at the entrance, metal detectors, background checks on everyone who RSVPs. They've hired an additional 12 security personnel just for the event. Which is why this invitation is gold, Reed said, tapping the envelope. Sir Young personally vouching for you, even as a joke, bypasses all of that. You'll walk right in. They won't even run your background because he's already vouched. Gina nodded slowly, thinking through the implications. What's happening at the ball that we care about? Everything, Jordan said, pulling up financial documents that filled 3 monitors. But specifically, the closing of the Harborview development deal. Sir Young's shipping company is purchasing a massive waterfront property for $340 million. The deal gets finalized Saturday night with signatures from the mayor, the city planning commission, and about a dozen investors. And the money? Gina asked, though she already knew the answer. Laundered through 7 different shell corporations, 3 countries, and a charity foundation that doesn't actually exist. Jordan highlighted the money trail on screen, a spiderweb of transactions that would take a federal prosecutor months to explain in court. We've tracked $217 million of it directly back to drug trafficking, human smuggling, and illegal weapon sales. The rest is still being traced, but we're confident it's equally dirty. Reed leaned against the table, his arms crossed. This is it, Gina. We get evidence of those signatures, proof that the mayor and the investors know where the money's coming from, and we can bring down the entire network. Sir Young, his associates, every corrupt politician on his payroll. This is the RICO case we've been building for 2 years. No pressure, Gina said with a slight smile. You've done harder, Reed replied. And it was true. She had. But never with stakes this high, never with this many moving pieces, never with the possibility of discovery meaning not just a blown operation but a shallow grave somewhere in the Hudson River. They worked until 3 in the morning, reviewing floor plans of the Golden Lotus Estate, identifying potential recording opportunities, discussing contingencies if things went wrong. Jordan showed her the equipment she'd be wearing. Microphones disguised as jewelry, cameras built into dress ornaments, a panic button that looked like a bracelet clasp. When Gina finally left, The city was quiet with that pre-dawn stillness that felt like holding your breath before a plunge. She returned to her studio apartment in Brooklyn, the one that matched her cover story, complete with photos of a daughter who didn't exist and bills she couldn't actually pay, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. In 48 hours, everything would change. Either she'd successfully expose one of the largest criminal organizations on the East Coast, or she'd disappear into the kind of unmarked grave that Sir Young's people specialized in creating. Sleep came eventually, thin and restless, full of dreams where she was running through ballrooms in a dress made of glass. The next evening, Gina was wiping down tables in the Golden Dragon's main dining room when a shadow fell across her work. She looked up to find Ramon Torres, Sir Young's head of security, watching her with eyes that missed nothing. Torres was ex-military special forces, the kind of man who could kill you 7 different ways with a dinner fork and make it look like an accident. He was built like a linebacker but moved with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent years learning how to be lethal efficiently. He'd been with Sir Young for 5 years, and in that time, he'd developed a reputation for being absolutely loyal and absolutely ruthless. "Got a minute?" he asked, his voice surprisingly soft for a man his size. "I'm working," Gina said, returning to the table, keeping her body language neutral and compliant. "It'll just take a minute." It wasn't a request. She set down her cloth and followed him through the restaurant, past the kitchen where the dinner rush was beginning, to the storage room at the back. It was a windowless space that smelled of cleaning supplies and rice wine, barely large enough for 2 people. Torres closed the door behind them and leaned against it, blocking the exit. "How long have you worked here?" he asked. 8 months. And before that? Red Lotus across town. Before that, a couple places in Brooklyn. Mario's, the Italian place on 5th. Before that. "I ran your background," Torres interrupted. "It all checks out. Single mother, daughter named Jasmine, 7 years old. Father's not in the picture. You work nights, go to community college during the day, studying business administration. You've got $34,000 in student loan debt and you're 3 months behind on rent." Gina kept her expression carefully neutral, even as her heart rate increased. "Okay. The thing is," Torres continued, studying her face, "you're too good at your job. Too perfect. Most people who work service, they've got attitude. They've got problems. They show up late, they cut corners, they talk back when the boss is being an asshole. You're perfect. Never late, never complain, never make mistakes. And perfect makes me nervous." "I just need the job," Gina said, putting a slight tremor in her voice that wasn't entirely faked. "I've got a kid to feed and rent to pay. I can't afford attitude. I can't afford to lose this job." "What's your daughter like?" The question threw her for a second, but she recovered. "Smart. Too smart sometimes. She's reading at a 5th grade level already. Loves science, wants to be an astronaut." The details came from Jordan's actual niece, borrowed for authenticity. "She asks questions I can't always answer. Where's her father? Gone. Has been since she was 2. He didn't want the responsibility." Torres was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face for cracks in the story. "You know what Mr. Young does, right? Really does. I know he owns businesses. Restaurants, clubs, the shipping company. And you don't ask questions about what gets shipped." "It's not my place to ask questions. I just serve drinks and clean tables." "Smart answer." Torres pushed off the door and stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. "Here's what I think. I think you're either exactly who you say you are, a woman trying to survive in a city that chews people up and spits them out, or you're something else entirely. And if you're something else, that means someone sent you. Which means someone thinks they can touch Mr. Young." Gina met his eyes, keeping her breathing steady. "I'm a waitress with a kid and debt. That's it. That's all I am." "Good," Torres said quietly. "Because if you were anything else, I'd have to kill you. And I don't like killing women." Had to do it twice in my career, and both times it bothered me for months afterward. I'd rather not add a third. He opened the door, and the sounds of the restaurant flooded back in. Dishes clattering, voices calling orders, the eternal chaos of a busy kitchen. Enjoy the bowl Saturday, Torres added as she stepped past him. Should be interesting. Gina returned to work with hands that didn't shake and a mind that raced through possibilities. Torres suspected something, but he hadn't acted on it. Which meant either he didn't have proof, or, and this was the more interesting and dangerous possibility, he had his own reasons for staying quiet. She made a mental note to have Jordan dig deeper into Torres's background. Look for leverage or weakness or anything that explained why a man that dangerous would hesitate. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of routine tasks and careful observation. She memorized faces, noted conversations, logged everything in the mental database she'd been building for months. By the time she clocked out at midnight, she had 3 new names to add to the network map and confirmation that a shipment was arriving at the docks Wednesday night. Her phone buzzed as she walked to the subway. Unknown number. Study. Midnight. Bring cleaning supplies. SY. She stared at the message for a full minute before responding with a simple, "Yes, sir." This was either an opportunity or a trap. With Sir Young, it was impossible to tell which until you were already in too deep to back out. Sir Young's private study was on the 3rd floor of the Golden Dragon, accessible only by a private elevator that required a keycard. Gina had never been inside. The invitation felt like a test, or maybe a trap, but refusing would be more suspicious than accepting. She arrived at midnight exactly, cleaning supplies in hand, and knocked on the heavy wooden door. "Come in." The study was smaller than she'd imagined but more impressive, lined floor to ceiling with books that looked read rather than decorative. A massive mahogany desk dominated the space, its surface covered with papers, a laptop, and a chessboard mid-game. The walls were decorated with art that Gina recognized. A small Rothko, what looked like an original Basquiat, a Chinese scroll painting that was probably worth more than her supposed annual salary. Sir Young sat behind the desk, still in his suit from earlier, a glass of whiskey within reach and reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked different here, less like a crime boss and more like a scholar, or maybe both at once. "Close the door," he said without looking up from whatever he was reading. Gina did as instructed, her senses on high alert for any sign of danger. "The shelves need dusting," he said, gesturing vaguely at the floor-to-ceiling bookcases. "Start there." She began to work, climbing the small ladder to reach the higher shelves. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft sound of her cloth against leather-bound spines. She could feel his eyes on her periodically, watching, evaluating, looking for something she couldn't quite identify. The books were fascinating, first editions of classics, obscure philosophy texts, poetry in multiple languages, military strategy, financial theory. This wasn't a collection for show. This was a library built by someone who actually read. "You read?" he asked suddenly, startling her slightly. "When I have time." "What do you read?" Gina hesitated. The safe answer was romance novels or celebrity memoirs, something appropriate for her cover, something that wouldn't raise questions. But something in his tone made her reconsider, made her think he was testing for something specific. "Right now. Art of War," she said carefully. "Sun Tzu." She felt rather than saw his interest sharpen. The quality of the silence changed. "Why?" he asked. "My daughter's teacher says she's being bullied at school. I'm trying to figure out strategy. How to teach her to protect herself without becoming the bully. Not to fight at all." It wasn't entirely a lie. Jordan's niece was being bullied, and Gina had suggested the book to him. But the answer served a dual purpose, revealing education and intelligence while remaining consistent with her cover story. "What's your favorite passage?" Sir Young asked, and now he was watching her directly, his full attention focused like a laser. Gina climbed down from the ladder and turned to face him. "Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition, or perhaps a mixture of both. "You understand what that means?" I think so. It's about perception. About control. About letting people underestimate you so you can move without resistance, without drawing the kind of attention that gets you destroyed. About hiding your real power until the moment it matters most, until you can use it decisively. Sir Young set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, studying her with new intensity. Most people who quote Sun Tzu don't actually understand him. They think it's about deception, about lying. But it's really about understanding that power isn't what you have, it's what people believe you have. Perception creates reality more than reality does. And belief, Gina said quietly, can be manufactured, can be shaped, can be weaponized. The silence that followed was different, charged with a current of mutual recognition that made her pulse quicken. She'd shown too much, revealed too much intelligence. The waitress act had slipped, and she'd let it slip, and now she didn't know if that was a catastrophic mistake or a calculated risk that might pay off. But Sir Young didn't call her on it. Instead, he stood and moved to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline where lights blazed in buildings full of people making their own calculations about power and survival. "The ball on Saturday," he said. "You're actually coming? You invited me. I humiliated you. You gave me an opportunity." He turned to face her. An opportunity for what? Gina met his eyes. To see how the other half lives. "Isn't that what you said?" For a moment, she thought he was going to push further, to demand the truth, to strip away the layers of deception and force her to admit what she really was. But instead, he smiled, a real smile, not the cruel smirk he wore in public like armor. "Finish the shelves," he said. "And Gina? Wear something memorable to the ball. I have a feeling it's going to be an interesting evening. The kind of evening people talk about for a very long time." She worked for another hour in silence, every nerve on edge, hyper-aware of his presence as he returned to his work. Occasionally he would ask her opinion on something, a book she was dusting, a piece of art on the wall, a philosophical question that seemed casual but wasn't. She answered carefully, walking the tightrope between appearing intelligent enough to be interesting and not so intelligent that she couldn't possibly be who she claimed. When he finally dismissed her, she rode the elevator down with her heart pounding and her mind racing. The game had shifted. Sir Young was no longer treating her like furniture, like someone beneath notice. He was treating her like a player, which meant one of two things. Either he knew exactly who she was and was playing his own game, or he was beginning to suspect and was testing her to see how far the deception went. Neither option was comfortable. Both were dangerous. She texted Reed as soon as she was clear of the building. "Need to meet. Things are developing." His response came immediately. "Tomorrow. 10 a.m. Safe house." Gina walked to the subway through streets that never really slept, past people living their own complicated lives, and wondered if she just made a fatal mistake or the smartest move of her career. The answer, she suspected, wouldn't be clear until Saturday night. The dress arrived at the safe house 2 days before the ball, delivered by courier in a garment bag that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Gina unzipped it slowly in front of Reed and Jordan, revealing sapphire blue silk that caught the light like liquid water and held it prisoner. Jordan whistled low. "That's not a dress. That's a weapon." "Custom Valentino," Reed said, checking the designer label and the accompanying documentation. "Made in Milan, flown in yesterday." The jeweler's sending the necklace separately under armed guard. 5-tier diamond collar, 200 carats total, valued at $1.3 million. Gina ran her fingers over the structured puff sleeves, feeling the quality of the fabric, the precision of the construction. The dress was spectacular, yes, but more than that, it was armor. Designed to transform her from invisible to unforgettable in a single moment, to announce that whoever wore it belonged in rooms where power was bought and sold like commodities. "Who's paying for this?" she asked. "The Bureau's discretionary fund," Reed said. "And before you ask, yes, they know exactly how much it costs, and yes, it took 3 levels of approval. But this is the operation, Gina. This is what we've been building toward for 2 years. We're not cutting corners now. The hair and makeup team arrives tomorrow morning," Jordan added, making notes on his tablet. We've arranged for a private car service to take you to the estate. Black Mercedes, professional driver who's actually one of ours. Everything will be wired for audio and limited visual. We'll have you on comms the entire night. What about backup? Gina asked. If things go wrong? We'll have a team stationed 3 minutes away, Reed said. Unmarked van, 4 agents, fully equipped. But the goal is for you to never need them. You get in, you observe, you record, you get out. Clean and simple. Nothing about this is clean or simple, Gina said, but she was already visualizing it. The entrance, the crowd, the moment when she'd walk into that ballroom and claim her place among the people who thought they owned the world. What about Sir Young? Jordan asked, looking up from his tablet. After that late-night meeting in his study, what's your assessment? Gina was quiet for a moment, thinking about the conversation, the way he'd tested her, the intelligence in his eyes when he'd smiled. He suspects something. I don't know if he knows exactly what, but he's not stupid. He's been watching me, testing me. The invitation might have started as a joke, but I think it's become something else. Like what? Reed asked. Like he's trying to figure out who I really am. Or maybe, she hesitated. Maybe he already knows and he's waiting to see what I do with the opportunity. Reed's expression darkened. If he knows, this whole operation is compromised. We should pull you out. No, Gina said firmly. If he knew for certain, I'd already be dead. Torres would have handled it in that storage room, or I'd have disappeared after that meeting in the study. Sir Young suspects, but he doesn't know. And that gives us an opening. An opening for what? To flip him, Gina said. Think about it. He's smart enough to know his empire can't last forever. Men like him either die violently or die in prison. But if we could offer him a third option, witness protection, immunity in exchange for testimony, he might take it. Jordan looked skeptical. You really think a man who's built what he's built would just walk away? I think a man who reads Sun Tzu and keeps a Rothko in his private study might be smart enough to know when the game is ending. And I think he might be tired. Reed considered this, his expression unreadable. It's a hell of a gamble. Everything about this operation is a gamble, Gina replied. But if we can get Sir Young to flip, we don't just take down his organization. We take down everyone he's connected to. The politicians, the investors, the entire network. It's bigger than just him. All right, Reed said finally. You have authority to make the offer if the opportunity presents itself. But Gina, be careful. Men like Sir Young don't get to where they are by being predictable or sentimental. If he thinks you're more valuable dead than alive, he won't hesitate. I know, Gina said. And she did. They worked through the evening, going over every detail of the plan, every contingency, every possible scenario. Jordan showed her how the recording equipment worked. Microphones disguised as earring posts, a camera built into the clasp of her clutch, another hidden in the necklace itself. The panic button was a diamond on her bracelet that she could press 3 times to signal distress. When they finally finished, it was past midnight. Gina gathered her things to leave, but Reed stopped her at the door. Hey, he said quietly. I know I don't say this enough, but you're the best operator I've ever worked with. What you've done these past 6 months, maintaining a cover this deep, building a legend this solid, it's extraordinary. Whatever happens Saturday, you should be proud. Gina smiled, genuine warmth breaking through the careful control. Just make sure the backup team is actually 3 minutes away and not 3 hours. 2 minutes, Reed promised. I lied about 3 to make you more careful. She left the safe house and made her way back to her cover apartment, checking for tails out of habit, taking random turns to ensure she wasn't being followed. The city was quieter now, that deep night stillness when even New York seemed to pause and breathe. In her apartment, she lay in bed and thought about the dress hanging in the safe house, about the woman she'd be on Saturday night. Not Gina the waitress, not Gina the undercover operative, but some third version, powerful and dangerous and absolutely unforgettable. She thought about Sir Young's smile in his study, about the way he'd looked at her when she quoted Sun Tzu, about the possibility that he might be looking for a way out just as desperately as she was looking for a way in. And she thought about what would happen if she was wrong about all of it. Sleep came eventually, but it was thin and fragmented, full of dreams about walking through halls of mirrors where every reflection showed a different version of herself, and she could never quite tell which one was real. Saturday arrived with clear skies and unseasonable warmth, as if the universe had decided to cooperate with the evening's drama. Gina spent the morning at the safe house, going over final details with Reed and Jordan, checking and rechecking every piece of equipment, every element of the plan. The necklace arrived at 2 in the afternoon, delivered by armed courier in a case that required 3 different keys to open. When Jordan finally lifted it out, the diamonds caught the fluorescent light and transformed it into something magical, a cascade of brilliance that seemed to hold Starlight captive. "Jesus," Reed said softly. "That's actually $1.3 million. According to the insurance," Jordan confirmed. 200 carats across 5 tiers. Each diamond individually selected and certified. This isn't just jewelry, this is a statement of power. He helped Gina put it on, the weight of it substantial against her collarbone, the cold metal warming quickly to her skin. She looked at herself in the mirror they'd brought in and barely recognized the woman staring back. The transformation hadn't even fully begun, and already she looked different. Dangerous, expensive, like someone who belonged in rooms where fortunes were made and destroyed. The hair and makeup team arrived at 3, 2 professionals who worked in silence and precision, transforming her natural curls into a voluminous afro that framed her face like a crown. The makeup was dramatic but precise, emphasizing her eyes, her cheekbones, the sharp intelligence she'd been hiding for 6 months. At 6, she finally put on the dress. The sapphire silk slid over her skin like water, the structured puff sleeves giving her shoulders a regal width, the bodice fitted perfectly to her frame. Jordan had integrated the recording equipment so seamlessly that it was invisible. Microphones in the sleeve seams, a camera disguised as decorative beading, every technological element hidden within the art of the garment itself. When she looked in the mirror this time, the room fell silent. "Holy hell," Jordan said finally. This wasn't a waitress. This wasn't even Gina Ebony, heiress and undercover agent. This was something else entirely. A queen, a warrior, a force of nature contained in sapphire silk and diamonds worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. "Sir Young wanted memorable," she said quietly, turning to see how the dress moved, how it caught the light. "I think this qualifies." Reed was staring at her with something like awe. "You're going to stop traffic." "That's the idea," Gina said. "Can't shift power if nobody notices you've entered the room." They did final equipment checks, audio clear, video functional, panic button tested and ready. Jordan walked her through the comms one more time, ensuring she could hear him and Reed clearly through the nearly invisible earpiece disguised as part of her diamond earrings. At 7:15 the car arrived, a black Mercedes S-Class with privacy glass and a driver who gave her a nearly imperceptible nod that told her he was bureau. She slid into the back seat, the dress pooling around her like liquid sapphire, and watched as Manhattan blurred past the windows. Her heart was steady, her mind clear. 6 months of preparation had led to this single evening. Every humiliation, every careful observation, every night spent memorizing faces and cataloging crimes. All of it converged on the next 4 hours. The drive to the Hamptons took 90 minutes. Gina spent it going over the guest list in her mind, reviewing the financial connections, identifying the key players she needed to observe. Mayor Richard Hastings would be there, along with half the city council. Vincent Corso and his real estate empire. Senator Brennan and his offshore accounts. Julian Cross and his cartel connections. Tommy Wu and his shipping containers that customs never inspected. And Sir Young, at the center of it all, orchestrating the symphony of corruption like a maestro. The Golden Lotus Estate appeared as the sun was setting, bathed in golden light that made it look like something from a fairy tale. Sprawling mansion, manicured gardens, fountains that threw water high into the air where it caught the last rays of sunlight and turned them into diamonds. Security was visible but discreet. Men in dark suits with earpieces positioned at strategic points, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Gina could see the technology they were using: facial recognition cameras at the entrance, metal detectors disguised as decorative pillars, security personnel who moved with military precision. Her car joined the queue of vehicles approaching the entrance: Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, Maybachs, cars worth more than houses. She watched as each guest was checked, their invitation scanned, their identity verified against the list. When her turn came, she stepped out of the Mercedes and handed her invitation to the security guard. He scanned it, looked at her, looked at the invitation again, then spoke quietly into his radio. For a moment, Gina wondered if this was where it all fell apart, if somehow they'd figured it out, if she'd miscalculated. "Enjoy your evening, miss," the guard said, returning her invitation with a slight bow. She walked through the entrance, past the metal detectors that didn't react to the sophisticated equipment hidden in her jewelry and dress, past the cameras that photographed her face and logged it in their system as a guest personally vouched for by Sir Young himself. And then she was through, standing in the grand foyer of the Golden Lotus Estate, surrounded by marble and gold and the kind of wealth that most people only saw in movies. The ballroom was ahead, through massive double doors that stood open like a gateway to another world. She could hear music drifting out, a string quartet playing something classical and beautiful. She could see the glow of amber lighting, the shimmer of crystal chandeliers, the movement of people in evening wear moving through space like dancers in a choreographed performance. "You're in," Reed's voice said quietly in her earpiece. "Audio and video are good. You're looking great on camera." "Copy that," Gina murmured, her lips barely moving. She took a breath, adjusted the diamond necklace at her throat, and walked toward the ballroom. The sapphire dress caught the light with every step, announcing her presence before she'd even entered the room. This was it. The moment 6 months of work had been building toward. The moment when Gina Ebony, invisible waitress, disappeared forever and something new was born. She stepped through the doors and into the light. The ballroom took her breath away, a space so grand it seemed designed to make humans feel small and insignificant by comparison. Amber lighting reflected off gold pillars that reached toward a ceiling painted with frescoes that probably cost more than small nations. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars hung like frozen starbursts, throwing fractured light across the crowd below. And what a crowd it was. 247 of the most powerful, wealthy, and corrupt people in New York, dressed in couture and diamonds, holding champagne flutes that cost more than her supposed monthly rent. Politicians laughed with criminals. Business moguls shook hands with money launderers. Everyone playing the game, everyone pretending they didn't know exactly what kind of room they were standing in. Gina stepped fully into the space, and the transformation began. The room didn't go silent all at once. It was more gradual, like a wave spreading outward from where she stood. The first person to notice her was a woman in emerald green near the entrance who stopped mid-sentence, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. Then her companion turned, and his eyes widened. Then the people standing near them looked to see what had caused the reaction. Conversations died like dominoes falling. Heads turned in sequence, creating a ripple effect that spread through the ballroom like concentric circles on water. Someone dropped a champagne flute, the crystal shattering on marble in a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the growing silence. Gina walked forward with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how much power she held in this moment. The sapphire dress moved like living water, catching the amber light and transforming it into something magical. The diamond necklace at her throat threw fractured rainbows across the walls. Her afro was a crown of natural power, her makeup sharp enough to cut, her expression serene and lethal and absolutely in control. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was a queen entering her domain, and every person in that room knew it instinctively. She spotted Sir Young across the ballroom, frozen with a drink halfway to his lips, his expression cycling through confusion, recognition, and something she couldn't quite read but looked almost like admiration. Next to him, Vincent Corso had gone pale. Senator Brennan looked like he might have a heart attack. Julian Cross was staring with his mouth literally hanging open. But Gina didn't approach any of them. Instead, She accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter with a slight nod of thanks and scanned the room for her real target. Mayor Richard Hastings stood near the terrace doors, surrounded by the usual circle of supplicants and power brokers. He was laughing at something, his face red with alcohol and self-satisfaction, completely unaware that his entire world was about to collapse around him. "Target acquired," Gina murmured, barely moving her lips. "Moving to intercept." "Copy that," Reed's voice said in her earpiece. "Remember, get him talking about the Harborview deal. We need audio confirmation that he knows where the money's coming from." Gina changed course, moving through the crowd with deliberate grace. People stepped aside automatically, creating a path as if she were royalty. She could feel their eyes on her, could hear the whispered questions. Who is she? Where did she come from? How did someone like that stay hidden? Perfect. She reached Hastings's circle and waited for a pause in the conversation before speaking. "Mayor Hastings," she said, her voice cutting through the ambient noise with precision. He turned, his smile automatic and political, then faltering when he actually looked at her. "I don't believe we've met." "No," Gina agreed. "But I know quite a bit about you. Your family's been in New York politics for 4 generations. Your great-grandfather was a city councilman, your grandfather a state senator, your father a congressman. You went to Columbia, met your wife Margaret at a fundraiser for ocean conservation in 2003. You have 3 children, Richard Jr., Patricia, and Thomas, and a golden retriever named Roosevelt." His smile was uncertain now, uncomfortable with how much she knew. "You've certainly done your research." "I have," Gina said, taking a sip of champagne. "For instance, I know about your offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The one you opened through Pelican Holdings in February of 2019. The one that's received $2.3 million in transfers from Sir Young's shipping company over the past 18 months. The blood drained from Hastings's face. Around them, the circle of people had gone very quiet, everyone suddenly very interested in their drinks while simultaneously hanging on every word. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction, his hand shaking slightly as he set down his champagne. "Of course you don't," Gina said with a smile that was all teeth. "Just like you don't know that Pelican Holdings is a shell corporation registered in Delaware with no actual business operations. Just like you don't know that the Harborview development deal you're signing tonight is funded by money laundered through drug trafficking, human smuggling, and illegal weapons sales. Just like you don't know that the FBI has been building a RICO case against Sir Young's entire operation for the past 2 years, and that they have documentation of every single transfer, every signature, every handshake." She let that sink in, watching his face cycle through denial, fear, anger, and finally calculation. The people around them were pretending not to listen while recording every word in their memories for later use. Gina leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper that only Hastings could hear. "You have 2 choices, Mr. Mayor. You can sign that deal tonight and go to prison where you'll spend the next 20 years watching your children grow up through glass partitions during visiting hours. Or you can walk away right now, refuse to sign, and contact the FBI on Monday to arrange cooperation. They're offering immunity to anyone who testifies against Sir Young and provides material evidence. Think very carefully about which option serves your family better." She stepped back, gave him a smile that suggested she just wished him a pleasant evening, and walked away before he could respond. Behind her, she could hear frantic whispered conversations, the sound of someone's political career imploding in real time. "Holy shit," Jordan's voice said in her earpiece. That was perfect. We got everything on audio. Clear admission of knowledge about the offshore accounts." "One down," Gina murmured, moving to secondary targets. She worked the room like a surgeon, precise and devastating. Vincent Corso and his real estate empire built on laundered money. She mentioned his properties in Miami, the ones purchased through shell corporations that traced back to Colombian cartels. Senator Brennan and his campaign finance violations. She casually brought up the mysterious $800,000 donation from a charity that didn't actually exist. Julian Cross and his hedge fund. She asked pointed questions about his yacht's frequent trips to the Caribbean and whether he'd had any interesting conversations with his clients from the Sinaloa cartel. Each conversation was brief, surgical, devastating. Each time she walked away, she left behind someone whose world had just been turned inside out, someone who was now calculating whether cooperation or silence was the better path to survival. The ballroom buzzed with nervous energy. People were leaving early, making excuses, suddenly remembering important appointments. The Harborview deal signing, scheduled for 9 o'clock, was quietly postponed when 3 of the key investors disappeared into the night. Gina stood near the terrace doors, watching the controlled chaos she'd created, and felt a surge of satisfaction so intense it was almost painful. "You're destroying them," Reed said in her earpiece, and she could hear the awe in his voice. "Half the room has left. The deal's falling apart. This is working better than we could have hoped." But Gina wasn't done yet. She saw Sir Young moving through the crowd toward her, his expression unreadable, his movements deliberate. People stepped aside for him automatically, creating a clear path between them like the parting of the Red Sea. He stopped a few feet away, studying her with those intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Now." Sir Young led her through a side door, down a corridor lined with art that probably represented more wealth than most small countries possessed, and into a private study that overlooked the estate's gardens. The door closed behind them with a decisive click, and suddenly they were alone. He moved to the window, his silhouette outlined by moonlight and the glow of the gardens below. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stood there looking out at the carefully manicured beauty that his empire had purchased. "Who are you?" he asked finally, his voice dangerously calm. "You know who I am. The Waitress act." "Was an act, yes. For how long?" 6 months. Sir Young laughed, but there was no humor in it, just a kind of exhausted disbelief. 6 months. Jesus Christ. I had you pegged at 3, maybe 4 weeks in. I thought you were corporate espionage at first, someone's ex-wife trying to dig up dirt for a divorce settlement, maybe even a journalist doing one of those undercover exposés. But FBI. He shook his head. That's ambitious. That's patience I didn't think the government was capable of anymore. You knew. Gina felt her hand drift toward the panic button disguised as a bracelet clasp, calculating distances and exit routes. Torres confirmed it about a month ago, Sir Young said, still looking out the window. Ran a deeper background check, found the seams in your legend. Good seams, professional, but there if you knew where to look. Former financial analyst, Oxford education buried under layers of false documentation, connections to federal law enforcement that didn't quite get scrubbed properly. But I told him to leave you alone. Why? Sir Young turned to face her, and in the moonlight, he looked tired, not physically, but spiritually, the kind of exhaustion that came from carrying weight for too long. Because I'm tired, Gina. Tired of pretending these people are my friends. Tired of washing blood money and calling it business. Tired of waking up every morning wondering which of my associates is going to put a bullet in my head because I know too much or not enough, or just because it's Tuesday and I've become inconvenient. He moved away from the window, closer to where she stood. I built an empire on other people's misery. I'm very good at it. But I'm also smart enough to know how this ends. Men like me, we don't get happy endings. We don't get retirement and grandchildren and peaceful deaths in our sleep. We get murdered by our associates, or we die in prison, alone and forgotten. Those are the only 2 options for people who do what I do. So why not just walk away? Gina asked, though she already knew the answer. Because they don't let you walk away. You know that. Once you're in until someone puts you in the ground. The cartels, the triads, the Russians, they all have long memories and longer reach. A man like me doesn't get to just quit. He paused, his eyes searching her face. Unless what? Unless I have protection. Federal protection. Witness protection. A new identity, a new life, away from all of this. A chance to actually survive past 50. Gina understood immediately what he was offering. You want to flip. I want to survive, Sir Young corrected. And I'm willing to give you everything to make that happen. Names, accounts, operations, locations. Evidence that will put half the organized crime families on the East Coast behind bars for the rest of their natural lives. Testimony that will dismantle networks it took decades to build. But I need guarantees. I can't make those guarantees, Gina said carefully. I'm not with the Bureau anymore. This is contract work. I don't have the authority. But you have contacts. People who can make this happen. People who want what I have badly enough to protect me in exchange. He crossed to his desk and pulled out a small thumb drive from a hidden drawer. This has everything. Offshore accounts with full transaction histories. Shell corporations with ownership documentation. Client lists that include politicians, business leaders, celebrities. Meeting recordings where deals were discussed explicitly. Shipment manifests showing exactly what was moved where and when. Enough evidence to dismantle the entire network. He held it out to her. Take it to your people. Get me a deal. Witness protection, full immunity, a new identity that actually works. And in return, I'll testify against everyone. I'll burn it all down and help you build cases that will stand up in federal court. Gina took the drive, feeling its weight in her palm. Such a small thing to hold so much destruction. And if I can't get you a deal? Sir Young smiled, sad and knowing. Then I suppose we both lose. You get to watch your case fall apart when key witnesses start disappearing and evidence gets destroyed, and I get to die knowing I tried to escape. But at least we'll both know we made the attempt. Why should I believe you? Gina asked. This could be a trap. The drive could be full of false information designed to waste our resources. You could be planning to disappear the moment we move on anything. You shouldn't believe me, Sir Young said simply. You should verify. Have your tech people analyze the drive. They'll find it's all genuine. Run the account numbers. Check the documentation, verify the recordings. It'll all check out because it's real. Because I really do want out, and this really is the only way that happens. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his eyes, the desperation hidden beneath the control. I've been feeding you information for the past month. Gina, did you really think you figured out the Harborview deal on your own? I left those files where you'd find them. The shipping manifests, the offshore transfers, the investor documentation. I made sure it was accessible because I wanted you to build the case. I wanted to give you everything you needed to bring this whole structure down. Gina's mind raced, replaying the past weeks, seeing the pattern she'd missed. You've been helping us. I've been helping myself, Sir Young corrected. But yes, our goals happen to align. You want to dismantle a criminal empire. I want to survive. Those two things can coexist quite nicely if we're both smart about it. She slipped the drive into her clutch, next to the recording equipment that had been capturing every word of this conversation. I'll make the call. But if this is a trick, then you already have enough evidence from tonight to arrest half my organization. And I'll be dead within a week from one of my own associates who figures out what I've done. I'm betting everything on this, Gina. My life, my freedom, my future. That should tell you something about how serious I am. There was a knock on the door. Sharp, urgent, the kind of sound that meant trouble. Sir Young opened it to find Ramon Torres, his expression grim. We have a problem, the security chief said. Mayor Hastings just left with FBI agents. Vincent Corso is gone. Half the investor list for Harborview has disappeared. And Julian Cross is on his phone to his lawyers, making noise about immunity deals. Sir Young looked at Gina, and something passed between them. Recognition that the moment had arrived, that everything was now in motion and couldn't be stopped. Get to the panic room, Torres said. If people are flipping this fast, someone's going to start trying to eliminate witnesses. You're not safe here. Neither are you, Sir Young said to his security chief. If this all comes down, you'll go down with it. Unless you want to make your own deal. Torres looked at Gina, then back at Sir Young. What kind of deal? The kind where you testify about who ordered what, who killed who, where the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively. The kind where you get immunity and protection instead of spending the rest of your life in maximum security. I'm listening, Torres said. Gina pressed the panic button 3 times, the signal for immediate extraction. My people are on the way. 2 minutes out. We need to move now, get somewhere secure where we can coordinate with the FBI properly. The garden house, Sir Young said. Stone walls, limited access, defensible position. We can hold there until your people arrive. They moved quickly through the estate, Torres leading the way with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd planned security protocols for exactly this kind of scenario. Behind them, the gala was dissolving into chaos. Guests streaming toward exits, security trying to maintain order, someone shouting about lawyers and lawsuits. The garden house was exactly what Sir Young had described. A small stone building that looked decorative but was actually built like a fortress. Torres secured the door and checked the windows while Gina established contact with Reed. Package is secure, she said quietly. I have Sir Young and his head of security, both willing to cooperate. I have a thumb drive with what he claims is comprehensive evidence of the entire operation. Jesus Christ, Reed's voice crackled in her earpiece. Extraction team is 90 seconds out. The bureau's mobilizing. They've already picked up Hastings and 3 other witnesses. This is actually happening. It's happening, Gina confirmed, looking at Sir Young, who stood by the window watching his empire collapse. Prepare for multiple high-value witnesses requiring immediate protection. This is bigger than we thought. She ended the call and turned to find both men watching her. So what now? Sir Young asked. Now we wait for my people to arrive. Then you both get taken into federal custody, you both get debriefed, and we start building the cases that will bring down everyone involved. It'll take months, maybe years. You'll both testify. You'll both be relocated. Your old lives end tonight. Good, Sir Young said quietly. My old life should have ended a long time ago. Through the window, Gina could see headlights approaching, unmarked vehicles moving fast across the estate grounds. The extraction team. Her people. It was over. 6 months of living a lie, 6 months of careful observation and controlled performance, 6 months of being invisible while gathering the evidence that would change everything. It all came down to this moment in a garden house on an estate bought with blood money, standing next to 2 men who'd chosen survival over loyalty. The vehicles stopped outside. Doors opened. Federal agents in tactical gear moved toward the building with practiced precision. Let's go, Gina said. Time to start your new lives. 3 months later, Gina stood on the balcony of a penthouse in Lower Manhattan, watching the sun set over the Hudson River. The city spread out below her like a kingdom of glass and steel, pulsing with the energy of 8 million lives being lived simultaneously. The sapphire dress hung in her closet, cleaned and preserved as evidence that would eventually be used in multiple trials. The diamond necklace had been returned to the jeweler. The safe house in Chinatown had been cleaned out and repurposed for another operation. But some things had changed in ways no one had anticipated. The door opened behind her, and Sir Young, now officially enrolled in witness protection under a new name she wasn't supposed to know but did, stepped onto the balcony carrying 2 glasses of wine. The prosecutors called, he said, handing her one. Corso's taking a plea deal. 20 years. Testifies against the cartels. Senator Brennan is looking at 15 to 20, and he's trying to negotiate down by giving up his connections to the Russian mob. And Cross? Gina asked. Fled to Argentina. Interpol has a warrant, but he's probably got resources there. Might be gone for good. 2 out of 3 isn't bad, Gina said, taking a sip of the wine, something expensive that she'd learned to appreciate during her 6 months undercover. The operation had been more successful than anyone had dared hope. Hastings had flipped immediately, providing documentation of bribes and kickbacks going back a decade. Torres had testified about contract killings and intimidation campaigns. And Sir Young, now technically a federal witness with a new identity, had provided evidence that had already led to 47 arrests and the seizure of over $800 million in assets. The Harborview development deal had collapsed. The Golden Dragon had been raided and shut down. The shipping company had been dissolved. An entire criminal empire, built over decades, had been dismantled in a matter of weeks. But the aftermath had been complicated. Sir Young couldn't go into traditional witness protection. He was too visible, too recognizable, and the number of people who wanted him dead was substantial. Instead, the FBI had created a new identity for him, complete with facial alterations subtle enough to pass casual observation and documentation that would hold up to everything short of a federal investigation. And Gina, well, she'd been offered a position with the Bureau's Organized Crime Division, supervising other undercover operations, using her experience to train the next generation of operators who would disappear into the shadows to bring down impossible targets. But she'd turned it down. "What are you thinking about?" Sir Young asked, joining her at the railing. "About how strange this all is," Gina admitted. 3 months ago, you were my target. Now what are we exactly? Partners, he said simply. I gave you the evidence to take down my organization. You gave me a way to survive. And now we're both dealing with the aftermath. It was true. In the weeks following the arrests, they'd been in constant contact, coordinating testimony, reviewing evidence, strategizing about how to maximize the impact of the cases. And somewhere in all those debriefings and strategy sessions, something had shifted. They'd recognized each other, these two people who'd spent their lives understanding power and how it moved. They'd seen past the masks to the intelligence beneath, the calculation, the understanding that survival in their respective worlds required a kind of ruthlessness that most people couldn't comprehend. I have a proposal, Sir Young said carefully. The Bureau has asked me to consult on other cases, help them understand how criminal organizations actually work, identify vulnerabilities in money laundering operations, provide insights into how these networks function. They're willing to pay well and provide continued protection. That's good, Gina said. And I'd like you to partner with me on it. Not as my handler or my supervisor, but as an equal partner. We could start a private consulting firm, work with law enforcement, with corporations trying to root out corruption, with governments trying to understand transnational crime. Use our combined expertise to actually make a difference. Gina turned to look at him, studying his face in the fading light. The face that had been subtly altered but still held the intelligence that had first caught her attention in that study surrounded by books. You want to fight crime for a living, she said. That's quite a career change. I want to survive, he corrected. And I want to do something with the knowledge I have that isn't destroying lives. I spent 20 years building criminal enterprises. Maybe I could spend the next 20 helping tear them down. It was tempting. More than tempting. The idea of using everything she'd learned, everything she'd sacrificed, to continue the work on a larger scale, it appealed to something fundamental in her nature. There's one condition, Gina said. Name it. We do it legitimately. No games, no hidden agendas, no revenge schemes against your former associates. If we're going to do this, we do it clean. We become the people we're pretending to be. Sir Young smiled, that real smile she'd first seen in his study when she'd quoted Sun Tzu. Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak. We've both been appearing weak for a long time. Maybe it's time to actually be strong. He extended his hand. Partners. Gina shook it, feeling the weight of the decision, the implications of choosing this path. She was walking away from the Bureau, from the structure and security of government work, to start something new with a man who'd been one of the most dangerous criminals on the East Coast. But she was also choosing possibility. Choosing to build something that could actually change how crime was fought, how organizations were dismantled, how justice was pursued. Partners, she agreed. They stood on the balcony as the sun finished setting, turning the Hudson River into molten gold, watching the city transform from day to night. Somewhere out there, criminals were making plans, laundering money, building empires on suffering. Somewhere out there, people needed what Gina and So Young could offer. Expertise, insight, the kind of knowledge that only came from living in the shadows. What should we call it? Gina asked. This consulting firm? Something simple, So Young said. Something that suggests transformation. Blue Storm Consulting, Gina suggested, thinking of the dress that had changed everything. The moment when she'd walked into that ballroom and shifted the entire balance of power. Perfect, So Young said. Though I have to ask, do you still have that dress? Evidence locker, Gina said. But yes, eventually I'll get it back. You should, he said. It was extraordinary. Like you were always meant to stand in rooms like that ballroom, rather than serve drinks in the shadows. I was meant to do both, Gina replied. The shadows taught me how power really works. The ballroom taught me how to use what I learned. Her phone buzzed, a message from Reed. Corso signed the plea. Brennan's trial starts in 6 weeks. Torres is settling into his new life. You did good, Gina. You did really good. She showed So Young the message, and they shared a moment of quiet satisfaction. We should celebrate, he said. We should, Gina agreed. But first, I want to go back to the Golden Dragon. One last time before they demolish it. Why? Because that's where it started. Where I knelt on the floor cleaning up whiskey while memorizing faces. Where you dropped that invitation in a puddle and changed everything without meaning to. I want to see it one more time, remember what it felt like to be invisible. So you don't forget. So I remember what I was fighting for. What I'm still fighting for. They left the penthouse and drove to the Golden Dragon, which stood empty now, stripped of furniture and fixtures, waiting for the demolition that would come next month. So Young still had keys. Some things hadn't been confiscated yet, and they let themselves in. The lounge was eerily quiet without music, without laughter, without the constant hum of criminal enterprise disguised as legitimate business. Their footsteps echoed on the marble floor as they walked to the VIP section where it had all begun. Gina stood in the exact spot where she'd knelt 6 months ago, and she could almost see the ghost of herself, the waitress with her head down, absorbing humiliation while cataloguing evidence. She could almost hear the laughter of men who thought they were untouchable. What are you thinking? So Young asked quietly. That I've been underestimated my entire life, Gina said. Because I'm a woman. Because I'm black. Because I chose to be invisible when I could have demanded attention. And I learned to use that underestimation like a weapon. I learned that being invisible gave me power that being visible never could. And now I get to choose. When to be invisible and when to be unforgettable. When to kneel and clean up whiskey and when to walk into ballrooms wearing sapphire and diamonds and shift the entire balance of power. She turned to face him. That's what I want Blue Storm to be. A place where we teach people that power isn't always loud. That sometimes the most effective way to fight monsters is to let them think you're not a threat until the moment you destroy them. So Young smiled. I think we're going to do good work together. I think we are too, Gina said. They left the Golden Dragon for the last time, locking the doors behind them, leaving behind the ghosts of who they'd been. Tomorrow, Blue Storm Consulting would officially open for business. Tomorrow, they'd start taking cases and dismantling organizations and teaching law enforcement how to think like criminals in order to catch them. But tonight, they stood in the parking lot of an empty lounge. 2 people who'd chosen survival over loyalty, truth over power, transformation over stagnation. To new beginnings, So Young said. To justice, Gina replied. Same thing, he said. Sometimes. They drove back into Manhattan as the city lit up for the evening, millions of lights blazing in buildings where millions of lives were being lived, where millions of stories were unfolding, where power was being built and destroyed and rebuilt in the eternal cycle of human ambition. And somewhere in that vast tapestry of life and struggle and survival, 2 people who'd learned to be invisible were choosing to be seen, not for ego or vanity, but because they discovered that sometimes the best way to change the world was to stand in the light and let everyone see exactly who you were and what you were capable of. The waitress who wasn't really a waitress had become the consultant who knew how empires fell. The crime boss who'd traded everything for survival had become the expert who helped prevent others from following his path. And together, they were building something new from the ashes of what they destroyed. Blue Storm Consulting. Where power met justice, where shadows met light, and where two people who'd lived in lies chose to build something true. 3 months later, the trials concluded. 47 arrests. $800 million seized. An empire built over decades, dismantled in weeks. Gina Ebony and her partner launched Blue Storm Consulting, using their expertise to dismantle criminal organizations worldwide. Mayor Hastings received immunity and resigned in disgrace. Vincent Corso, 20 years. Senator Brennan, 15 years. Julian Cross, still at large in Argentina. Ramon Torres entered witness protection and now trains federal agents. The Golden Dragon Lounge was demolished to make way for a community center. And the $1 million sapphire dress? It sits in an evidence locker, waiting to remind the world that power isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks into a room and changes everything without saying a word. Text fades. Outro music. Sophisticated, triumphant instrumental with strings. Host voiceover warm, engaging tone. And that's the story of the waitress who wasn't really a waitress, and the invitation that changed everything. If this story moved you, hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I genuinely love saying hello and knowing how far our stories are reaching across the world. Are you watching from New York, London, Tokyo, Lagos? Drop your city below. And here's a question for you. If you had the chance to go undercover and bring down corruption, would you take it? What would your $1 million moment look like? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. We've got some incredible tales coming your way. Stories of justice, redemption, revenge, and transformation that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Remember, sometimes the most powerful people in the room are the ones nobody's paying attention to. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and never underestimate the person serving your drinks.